button.
Wonderful. So, welcome to Making Waves to Move to Joy, a series of mini webinars where Johanna and I get real about the ebb and flow of finding lasting joy and happiness as women and as leaders. And so, as we go through this series, we're going to be unpacking some of the top reasons why leaders struggle to find joy by sharing our stories, exploring some of the lessons we have learned, and how you might be able to take those lessons and reignite your own joy. So, we are here to help you get the most out of this session. And we're going to look at some insights this week on that myth of what if I fail versus what if I can. And so while we do have some returning attendees, we do have some new people. So Johanna, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, so thank you so much, Marie. So my name is Johanna Danaher, and I'm based in Connecticut in the United States. And I spent 25 years of my career in pharma HR, focusing in on talent, strategies, as well as organizational culture. And today I really focus my work on partnering with early talent to accelerate in their first corporate role, midlife, mid-career professionals navigate their career and life transitions, and also pre-retirees redefine themselves beyond the title. It's really transforming how we see ourselves and what's possible. The magic I bring, right, is helping people see the invisible cycle that they're stuck in and then giving them a way to interrupt those cycles. And Marie, what about yourself?
Yeah, so I am Marie Clark. I am the owner of Move to Joy Coaching, where I am the client joy optimizer. And my whole role now is to be a dream champion and possibility partner. So I have years in education, followed by 20 years in corporate America, with most of those being either a manager or a project manager. And so what I do is I now help individuals take that dream of, well, someday I will, whatever that is, whether that is leave a corporate career to go work in an industry that perhaps doesn't pay as well,
Mhm.
but really fulfills their heart, or they are wanting to make an impact or explore their world or just become a healthier human being for themselves and their family. Um,
Yeah.
my job now is to bring creative solutions and unique strategies along with practical tactics and that emotional support to really helping people make their dreams come true. So, today we're going to talk about that what if I fail myth that holds so many of us back from achieving our career goals or our retirement goals, which is the group I know that you work with, Johanna, or in my case, with people that just have a someday dream. So let's talk about where you see this myth showing up with your clients.
Yeah, Marie, that is such a great question. And, as I've been reflecting on this, there's one particular client that sort of really stands out. This was a mid-level leader that I worked with, 10 years of experience in her organization, very respected by her team and doing great work. And she wanted a promotion. She had been passed over once before, about 2 years earlier, and that really stung. And, the story she was telling herself in that moment was that she wasn't ready then, that she needed more experience. She needed, more proof, another certification, another project that she had led. And now she really felt ready, right? She had had that 2 years of, getting some different experiences, working with a mentor. And her manager even was hinting that leadership was watching her, that opportunities might open up. But every single time she thought about stepping forward, putting her name out there, having that conversation, she found a reason to wait. I should update my resume first. I need to finish this project before I can talk about the next big thing. Maybe after this next review cycle, after I prove myself a little bit more, right? So she had all of these reasons that she was not going to move forward with raising her hand and talking with her leader about, a potential for a promotion or a different role. And that probably sounds familiar to a lot of us, right? It certainly did to me. And one of the things that was so interesting in our conversation is that it was really about a protection cycle. And it made perfect sense. She had been rejected before. And in that moment, the pain of that rejection taught her brain subconsciously something about the situation, that stepping forward equaled risk. And if it equaled risk, risk is scary. Risk is something that we have to protect ourselves against. And so her brain subconsciously built a system to keep her safe, right? And this is a totally normal and natural system. It stems from, a biological need to protect ourselves. But the protection cycle works like this. It's a trigger, right? An opportunity shows up, like the promotion that she wanted. Then there's a thought, an automatic thought. What if I'm not ready? What if I fail? Then that triggers an emotional response of anxiety, of self doubt, of fear of exposure, because that's what happened in the past where that pain showed up. Then that actually results in a behavior. That behavior is you wait, or you over prepare, or you find reasons that it's not the right time. And then that becomes reinforced, right? Waiting feels safer. The anxiety goes down, and ultimately the cycle strengthens, right? So the experience that she had in the past taught her brain that speaking up and saying, I'm ready for a promotion is dangerous. Wanting more meant risking rejection. So her nervous system learned that to protect her, it had to keep her small. And that worked for a while. But the thing is, the strategy that kept her safe was now keeping her stuck.
Yeah, I love how you talk about how it seemed reasonable, right? It was, I have to do this, I have to do this. These all seem very logical and reasonable, and our brain tells us they're the right things to do.
Mhm.
But yet, you really help us see that that is something that we've put in place to protect us and keep us safe.
Absolutely. And then once we see that, once we name it and understand it for what it is, we now have something to work with, right? And so at that moment, one of the things that she and I worked through was about how do we interrupt that automatic cycle? And really, one of the most profound things we can do is to pause, right? To take that moment to slow down, to pause. And in that pause, I asked my client, a different question. It was, what if you're ready? Not, are you ready? Because her brain already had that answer, and the answer was no. But what if you're ready? That question doesn't erase the fear, but it gives us something else to hold on to. And when we practice that over and over and over through my waves transformation journey process, we build the muscle of interrupting those patterns. And so the next time for Sarah that a growth opportunity came up, she didn't wait. She actually spoke up. She didn't get the promotion yet, um, but it did open the door for a very different type of a conversation with her leader about her growth. They co-created a development plan that was more forward-looking, right? She actually was given a leadership role as the pilot in command on a very key cross-functional project within her organization. But more importantly than those outcomes, she actually learned that she could trust herself to move towards something she wanted, even when it scared her, even when her brain was telling her, this is risky and this is painful.
Yeah, I love that question of what if, but some of the magic that you bring, I think, is opening up that pause and creating that space. Because when we ask what if, and we haven't created that space, that fear, that repetitive pattern in our brains just answers the question,
Yeah.
right? And so by you holding that space for your client, you really helped her be able to see the possibilities of what if, and then allowed her to really step into her future. And that's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I think it's not because we actually, need fixing, right? It's because our system was doing exactly what it was designed to do, protect us. But now it's time to teach it something new. And as you said, that's exactly the magic that we bring into these types of conversations is to help interrupt those subconscious cycles that are happening without our awareness and ask a different question. And Marie, I'm curious for you. I'm sure you've had clients that have had similar experiences, and I'd love to hear, an example of, how you've helped a client move past what if I fail to what if I can.
Yeah, so it's really interesting because the pattern that I saw with my client was very similar to the pattern you saw with yours. However, yours was talking about, I'm not ready, and my client was focusing on responsibility. So
Mm,
my client, very successful, owned multiple businesses, but really wanted to be a digital nomad. And most of his businesses were mobile. He could pick up and move, but yet he had been stuck in a city for 15 years. And in his case, responsibility kept showing up. So he would start to plan of, I could be a digital nomad, I could do this. And then he would have a business that needed his in-person presence. He would have parents that were starting to age and needed him to come assist. And so all of these things started to show up as I'm responsible, I'm an adult, I have to do these things. Then we talked in the previous season about that have to myth, but it sounds so logical, just like your client. And so he really needed to look at these obstacles and really try and figure out, are these true obstacles to having his dream of being a digital nomad? Or were they really fear of some sort masquerading as responsibility?
mm.
And
Yeah,
so, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say fear often does masquerade, right? It puts on different armor, so to speak, right? In my client's case, it was, that fear of pain, that fear of failure. And in your client's case, it's sort of that fear of neglecting, important components of things that he was responsible for, and then feeling like he was not serving up to them.
Yeah. So my client was very concerned about disappointing the people he cared about. And while his gender is male, we see that a lot with women. Women are often worried about disappointing those that rely on them and that they care for, to the detriment of our own hopes and dreams. And so, one of the things we did with this particular client was we started with, do you really still want this? Or is this a dream from the past that is no longer something that you really want? Because we find a lot of times with our clients, you and I both, that they're pursuing something that maybe doesn't truly fulfill them anymore. And so with this particular client, we really worked through that. Is this yearning and restlessness you feel because you still want to be a digital nomad or because something else in your life has to change? And so we did discover that this is what he still wanted. He still wanted to explore and see the world, but he also needed to make sure he could manage that guilt and feelings of disappointing those in his life and still feel responsible so that he could feel comfortable with his decisions. And so as we worked through that, we kind of pulled out pieces from my map process where we measured kind of like, what are the responsibilities you have? What are the obstacles? Because there are often real life obstacles In this case, he had aging parents that needed support, and he had a pet who did not travel well. So he and his pet did not have a good match there from that perspective. But that's a real obstacle because he had a responsibility to his pet. He felt responsibility to his parents. And as we worked through that, we discovered that there were ways to handle these obstacles. And some of them were easier than others to work through. But there was a way to creatively solve the problem of I am responsible and I have things that I need to do with my desire to have my dreams. And that is a reality that so often we are stuck in the what if I fail? And we don't even really begin to see the possibilities that are present in what if I can because of that weight of responsibility. And so one of the things we do is really help lift some of that weight and that heaviness that we all carry.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's so important, Marie, is this, and I love that you talk about the weight and the responsibility that we all carry, because that is absolutely 100% something that, you know, we all feel at different times. And I also really liked how you identified really the first step was in relation to clarifying. Is this what you really want, right? Clarity in whatever form that clarity comes in is so critical because oftentimes in my client's case, the protection cycle really was running in the background and it wasn't about, clarity in terms of what she wanted, but it was clarity in terms of who's running the cycle, right? What's actually happening here? What's the story that I'm telling myself in this moment? And in your client's case, it was understanding, you know, what was behind the word responsible and how was that getting in his way of actually pursuing the dream that he really did want.
Yeah, and it's really interesting too that for most of our clients, and in particular these two we are highlighting today, it starts with that pause, really, in your case, breaking that protection cycle. In my case, clarifying what we really wanted and what the obstacles were. And then asking that, what if I can? And then creating those small steps forward. And in my client's case, we're able to map out a plan between the two of us with accountability points so that he could accomplish this. I know in your case, it was a combination of the work you did and the work her employer did, or she did with her employer.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not always this big, giant map out the next 5 years. It's often just one small step that moves us into that what if I can mentality.
Yeah, and I love that because I also think that you're highlighting here the sort of the growth mindset or the learning mindset, right? Because if we're always looking 5 years out and saying that that's my dream, we may actually miss all the magic that's around us, right? So it is important to take that small step. It's also important to then continuously ask ourselves these very simple questions, right? Because these things that we say to ourselves, whether it's we're protecting ourselves against some sort of pain, whether it is we're telling ourselves we have responsibilities and accountabilities, oftentimes then we're making assumptions about what that means versus actually testing the reality that of what we want and what we're dreaming for. So these things are important to ask ourselves regularly over time, right? And that's one of the things that when I work through my process with clients, we focus in on starting with understanding who are you? What do you want? What are your hopes and your dreams? What are the, abilities that you have that serve you well? What are the values that guide you, right? What is the energy that you bring to every circumstance? And I know you do the same thing, Marie, and it's always important to just ask these questions because then all of a sudden we uncover that it's not something else that's keeping us stuck, it's ourselves, right? And when we actually just recognize that and we interrupt those patterns or those stories that we tell ourselves, possibility emerges. So Marie, what else do you do? And you talked a little bit about your map process, and I talked about my waves process, but what else do you do to help your clients move towards that next phase?
Yeah, so while we both have very specific proprietary processes we follow, a lot of it is things that have been around a long time, but that we've lost track of in all the noise that's happening in our modern world. And so today, I really kind of want to focus in, maybe not on those large processes that we have, but let's talk about kind of three things that are part of our processes that really apply to today's topic. And I know the first one, Johanna, is your kind of one of the things you're known for, right? So you tell us a little bit about that pause that really is critical to the work you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is the power of the pause, right? It's that noticing of what's happening between something that triggers us and our response. Now, it's in the protection cycle, it's in a meeting, it could be when you're making dinner or you got your kid's report card, whatever it might be. There's something that triggers an automatic reaction that we have. And when we pause, we shift out of reaction to intentional choice, right? To response where choice lives. And when we feel like that familiar tightness, like your shoulders are kind of, getting tight, you have these racing thoughts, you have the urge to sort of step back and play it safe. That's a cue that something is happening that is either the protection cycle or a story that we're telling ourselves. So observe it, right? These sort of protection cycles, these stories that we tell ourselves in our brains, they run on autopilot. The pause interrupts that autopilot moment. So I tell my clients and I tell myself, ask, what's happening right now? What am I protecting myself from? What story am I telling myself right now? And is it helping or hurting me? Just pause. Doesn't have to be a big pause, just pause. And so,
Yeah.
Marie, what's another tip?
Yeah, so the next two are kind of very dear to my heart, both as a project manager and as someone who successfully helps people achieve their dreams. Um, and they're baked into that map process that I have. And one of them is that vision, right? So first you have to take the pause. You have to interrupt the cycle. And once you interrupt that cycle, in that space, to begin to ask, what if it works? And you can list all the reasons why it won't work, but then you can also throw that in with well, what would occur if it did work? And a big part of that is really taking some time to visualize and to feel the success. Not just a vague, oh, it'd be great to be a digital nomad. It would be great to have the promotion. It would be great to have, whatever, be able to, climb a mountain or whatever your vision is. But to actually begin to put yourself in that position because your brain cannot tell the difference between what you imagine and what is real. And we often end up with the what if I fail and you're catastrophizing what's going on. And it's a self fulfilling prophecy. But when we take that pause and begin to open ourselves up to the possibility that good things could happen, we can have our dreams. Once we're open to that vision, then we can begin to take a small step because you don't have to believe it will all happen. All you have to do is believe enough to take one small step.
Oh, I love that, Marie. Just as you said, we've rehearsed failure 1,000 times in our minds, right? And I certainly do that. I wake up myself up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I've done this numbers of times. But you're so right. That small step. Start where you are. Build the muscle through practice, not perfection. We don't need perfect plans. We just need momentum. We just need to start. One question One conversation, one email, one boundary, whatever it may be. And I love what you said earlier, right? The I can muscle doesn't grow from us thinking about it. It grows from using it, right? It grows from us doing it. Each small step rewrites the story, and each small step builds evidence that I can.
Yes. And to help you with that, those that have attended this webinar will be receiving a worksheet that will help you. I guess it's more of a workbook, actually, in your email that will really help you kind of put these three pieces into place in your life and help you see where you might be able to pause, create a vision, and take some small steps. And if anyone is looking to take some small steps, you are also welcome to reach out to Johanna and I. Our contact information is in the chat or will be in the email for those that attended. And we really want to help you create your vision of what could happen if you can instead of if you fail.
Absolutely, Marie. So, one small step to create that vision is to reach out to either of us, schedule a conversation, or come join our next episode of season 2, where we're going to be talking about how to embrace fearlessness. It's this idea of the myth of confidence. Are you born with it or do you build it? So, our next session is going to be on February 25th at 4:30 in the afternoon Eastern Standard Time. So you can look for some information in your inbox, or I think, Marie, if you have the link to register, you'll pop it also into the chat. So thank you everyone for joining us on this journey back to joy, because our willingness to start while removing judgment, while telling ourselves we're protecting ourselves, while understanding what clarity we need in terms of what we're really looking for, right? All of that is what creates those waves of happiness. So, Marie, thank you so much for talking with me today about this myth. And is there anything else you'd like to close with?
No, I think that I am so excited to continue helping women and anyone that attends these webinars to really start to step into their full potential and their full joy. So I look forward to talking with you in February on our next episode.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Keep an eye out, and we'll talk again soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.